I bet you have been wondering for some time just what 17th century caffeine addicts can tell us about employability and the future of work. I will put to you that those same caffeine addicts were founders of what we now know as an entrepreneurial class, the people creating their own value and moving forward their own employability into the future. Before I go any further, can I just get a show of hands, please? Who has had at least one cup of coffee today? A few. Great. Thank you. You can put your hands down. Those of you who said yes, well, you are participating in a substantial part of the UK's economy. In fact, it's been assessed that something like 95 million cups of coffee are consumed every day in the UK. About half of those are in the comfort of our homes, about a quarter in some form of workspace, and a further quarter in coffee houses up and down the country. Now, of the people who raised your hands a moment ago, who, while you were drinking your coffee, were thinking about the world's major issues, positive or negative, maybe around technology or politics or the environment? Who amongst you were thinking about those sorts of topics while you were having coffee? A few. I see a few. Thank you. And out of those, who amongst you were finding solutions to some of those events, some way of bringing forward humanity or technical issues or so on? If I can see some show of hands there, I'd like to exchange details with you after the presentations today. Why is that? I would put to you that change brings opportunity, and the entrepreneur will look at that opportunity and find a way to create a business venture out of that. I would love to be back in the 1630s, just an arbitrarily selected decade. I'd love to be able to walk down the street and talk to the average person on the street. And I bet that their bingo cards would not include things like, in the 1640s, this country would be plunged into civil war. In 1649, this country would find the king, King Charles I, guilty of treason and execute him. And then in the 1650s, wow, we're being governed by Puritans. People who do not believe in the same values that we hold dear today. People who would either outright ban or heavily restrict public celebrations of major events, for example, Christmas, or ban alcohol or public music or gambling. That creates disruption. That creates a lot of opportunity. After all, humanity wants to continue getting together. Humanity wants to continue enjoying each other and enjoying the presence of one another. So what do we have? We have in 1652, the creation of the first coffee house. A man called Pasqua Rose brings coffee to London for the first time. Now, this topic has been very, very well researched and talked about by experts in the field, but I just want to give you some idea of what was going on in that time. For the most of the 1650s, we have a transition from a coffee shack that was established in St. Michael's Alley, just a few blocks away from Bank Station in the City of London, to coffee shops. Coffee shops would have looked very much like this. I love the juxtaposition of a late 1600s coffee shop imagined by AI. But this is quite true to a number of the pictures that we do see about coffee shops of those days. The first thing that we notice is that there are only men in the picture. If you were a woman in this coffee shop, you would probably be working there. You'd probably be serving. Thank goodness our inclusion credentials have matured significantly in the last 3 centuries. You would pay a penny to get in, and that penny would be for an all-you-can-drink experience. Now, the coffee wasn't particularly good. It's not what we consume today. The idea of sweetener and milk and so on wouldn't have entered into it at that point, but it would be all-you-can-drink. And we can see by the picture, it's a very boisterous environment. Today, I would imagine that if you go into either an independent or a chain coffee shop, you carve out a space that's your own. Maybe you, a couple of friends, maybe some colleagues, and you defend that space. You bring in a book, you bring in a laptop, tablet, whatever the case might be, but you're really on your own. In the older coffee shops 300 years ago, you would actively participate in conversations. You would come in, you'd pay your penny. Incidentally, there's a really interesting story, saved for another time, about that's where the first loyalty card was invented. The late 1600s in coffee shops. But anyway, you'd go in and you would join other conversations already in progress, trying to hear all the new stories from people you might see on a daily basis or people you've never seen in your life before. This is where we get the idea, the notion of a penny university. It costs a penny to go in, and you're learning tremendously from all these other people's experiences. By the way, in those days, a penny would have bought you a loaf of bread or a hunk of cheese. That's kind of the value of money that we're talking about at that time. Indeed, there's more disruption. In the early 1660s, we have the monarchy that's restored. We have Charles II on the throne. 1666, we have a devastating fire in the middle of the city of London. Everything that's pink on the map was absolutely gutted by fire. 100,000 people out of 200,000 people living in the square mile, as we call it today, were displaced. 13,000 homes completely razed to the ground. And King Charles II issued a decree saying, you must rebuild Europe's main trading site, main trading and financial city within 7 years. Now, if that's not entrepreneurial spirit, I'm not quite sure what is. But all this disruption, through all these change of times, even with the reintroduction of alcohol, we've got coffee shops that are continuing to grow and flourish. 1650s, 1660s, we've got maybe a couple of dozen that have grown and developed. By the turn of the century, into the early 1700s, the history books say that there might be around 500 at that time. Within another 50 years, maybe the mid-1700s, we've got around 3,000 coffee shops within the City of London and what we now know as the City of Westminster. That's a lot of competition. The entrepreneurs of the day, the people who are opening up those new cafes, needed to find a way to compete. Some of them opened up cafes where you could only be served if you spoke classical Greek or Latin. Yeah, they didn't last very long, those businesses. Other ones were important hotbeds and discussions of more topical interests of the day. Ships coming back into port and whether they were safely coming back into port, bringing in all these exotic products from the New World. That created something with a lot more staying power, what we now know is the insurance industry. So whether those entrepreneurs of the day tried and failed, like those some coffee shops that were really quirky, requiring a language restriction, or tried and succeeded creating this multi-trillion-dollar a year industry in insurance, they were all entrepreneurs. What do they have in common? An entrepreneur will have some degree of business acumen. They will be looking at what's happening around them and make some observations and potentially make some decisions to say, well, actually, I've got a solution for whatever this challenge, whatever this issue is today. They'll want to take some element of risk. That could be financial risk, it could be business risk, it could be opportunity risk, doing one thing instead of maybe doing something else, being employed in a regular job, shall we say. It could be a reputational risk. They could try, they could fail. What happens then? But they're always looking at success and the long-term value creation. So if we think about some of our entrepreneurs today, the people who are changing the way we shop, changing the way we explore space, changing the way we drive, they're looking at business opportunities that will far outlive them. We've talked quite a lot about a time in history that's 300 years ago. We've talked a little bit about the here and now. I'd like to share some of my own personal experience from the 1990s. So I went to university in a small town in eastern Canada called Halifax, Nova Scotia. I studied British history, contemporary British history at the time. Went back to my hometown, the national capital of Ottawa. I realized very quickly that I could not find any jobs as a British historian. My family looked at me and said, "You didn't think that one through very well, did you?" But then they went on to give me some great guidance, and they said, "Well, look, what is it that you have been doing all this time at university? What skills have you learned? What have you picked up? What can you then use to drive forward in the future?" And I thought, well, gosh, I was doing a lot with the internet. I was the nerd in the residence with the computer, with a modem, tapping into the university network and using that network to tap into British universities so I could conduct my research in the field of British history. So it's part of all that took me back to Ottawa and said, well, look, if I can do that as an art student, then I should be able to teach other people. So in September 1994, I founded one of Canada's first .coms, initially training people on how to use the internet, how to get connected, but then bringing on a couple of business partners who had some technical expertise. We were building websites and doing application development and so on and so forth. And we were participating in a very different coffee shop. We were participating online in bulletin boards and discussion groups that were all centered around the University of Cambridge Trojan Room, where they had the first webcam set up on a coffee pot in the staff room so that members of the faculty could log in and check out how much coffee there was in the pot and whether or not it was worth their while to walk down the hall and pour themselves a cup. But all those discussions led to new ideas. And one of those new ideas was the building of one of the very first online exam preparation tools. No one had done that before. We needed to figure out how to build the website. We needed to figure out how to get the content. We needed to figure out how to go up against the major Canadian banks and ask for merchant numbers so we could take credit cards online. My colleagues in sales needed to figure out how to pitch this product to training centers across North America before the days of video conferencing, screen sharing, all that wonderful stuff. Very, very innovative at the time. I would suggest to you that most entrepreneurs, and you probably saw in the previous slide, entrepreneurialism is something of a superpower. Most entrepreneurs, of course, have high intelligence and are strong at academia, but also will go on to see that business acumen, see the possibility of how to fix a problem. They will have some ability to fix problems and do some problem solving in a very quick, fast-paced way. They'll be able to overcome those barriers. Like, how do you go up against a major chartered bank when you're only a bean of a company? Try to convince them that it's a good idea to have a merchant number so that we can use this thing called the internet and sell online. You'll also have some degree of leadership and influence. You might be a transformational leader, you might be a democratic leader, you might be a laissez-faire leader. There's a whole range of study in this, but you will have some ability to lead people. Circling back from 350 years ago, the City of London has just last year released its SME strategy. And I would suggest that part of the reason why they can make this claim that the square mile is arguably the most successful example of economic agglomeration, basically a number of businesses and a number of different communities within a small focused area, is because of those coffee shop entrepreneurs 350 years ago, the ones who saw opportunities, the ones who took risks. I'm going to ask you, what is your coffee house going to look like? What skills are you going to bring in? How are you going to package something and create your own way into the future? You'll have a need to think strategically about the situation, about the here and now, what's going on, what might the future hold. You'll need to take your ideas and turn them into action. It's great to have ideas, but you need to take that first step and turn those ideas into action. And part of that will be connecting with others, whether they're physically in the same room with you, at the same table, or on the other side of the world. And if you're walking down the hall having your third cup of coffee of the day, someone takes you up on that and challenges you, why are you drinking so much caffeine? Just say, you're building the future of work. Thank you.